Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Next Step Espresso, your daily shot of fitness. I am your host, as always, Johnny Landals from Next Step Nutrition, bringing you the podcast that helps you overcome the nutrition confusion and get results for good. Today, we're on episode 406. And the preface to this episode is that if you want more details on understanding and reading research, then you need to check out Flat White episode 15 with Alan Flanagan, and the link of that is going to be in the notes of this episode as well. So I do highly recommend that. But the world we live in right now, with nutrition in particular, is really, really hard to get our head around because there's not only a lot of research out there, there's also a lot of newspaper articles and magazine articles and Netflix documentaries and editorial papers and blogs and podcasts and a whole host of things that can do well to confuse us. And the evidence-based label isn't actually as useful as it once was. Now, to be completely honest with you now, a lot of the research that I read comes from research reviews. So I use things like the monthly application of Strength Sport review, as well as the James Krieger Weightology review, and a little bit from the Renaissance Periodization crew as well. So there's a few good research reviews there that you can check out. These are independent scientists who read research, review it, and then throw up the pros and cons and critique it basically inside a neat little journal. Very, very useful on a monthly basis to kind of see what's being done and what's new. But what we need to remember is that new research doesn't always outweigh old research. There's always going to be other things that have been done. And with every single research paper, you need to look at the strength of said research paper, the sample size, so the size of people that they worked with, and what other things have been done that maybe disagree with that research paper. So already you can see that to review things by yourself, it can take a lot of time. But when you're looking independently at, let's say, like a newspaper article or a journal or something that quotes a research paper, if you can find the evidence for what they're citing, it is good to look into it. And it's good then to look at how the research paper was done. Because imagine a pyramid. There is a hierarchy of research that papers fit into, right? And at the very bottom of this pyramid, so the worst kind of research applicable to us would be the Petri dish research, which would be in vitro, as well as like animal studies, right? Because animal studies are not ever going to be relative to humans. Now, this pyramid kind of goes upwards and upwards toward the top. You'd find double-blind placebo studies, randomized control trials, and then meta-analyses and systematic reviews. Now, a lot of the time, the meta-analyses and systematic reviews are very, very worth looking at because they are a review of all the research in a given area where they then say, right, based on this, based on how this was done, based on what this showed, we can therefore kind of assume that probably this is kind of the thing. And that's the thing about science, is that you're never really going to completely prove anything, and you're always going to be limited with the amount of people that were in the research, the way the research paper was done, what they found, and how that could be different with a different population at a different time with a different research question. So there's always going to be a bunch of things that are going to get in the way of it being perfect. Now, a lot of the time when people quote a random research paper, they'll say, oh yeah, well, X and X study proved this. And then you look at it and it's an observational study, which means it's just an observation of a large population. And they didn't control for a lot of compounding variables which could affect a result. And they're just noticing, okay, a lot of these people do this and they also have this thing. Therefore, we can conclude that this would equal this. And you could never do that, right? Just because you observe something in a population doesn't mean that that's completely caused by one thing. That correlation does not equal a causation, as we say. So a lot of the time, randomized control trials are your best bet as opposed to observational. So when you're looking at research, look for reviews of bodies of evidence over individual studies. And always try to make sure that you're looking at peer-reviewed research, which means that it's critiqued by other scientists. It's still not perfect because you will get, random research studies that show one thing and then that they could never be reproduced, but that paper still exists. So you will get anomalies, you'll get issues with sample sizes, but it is the best that we have right now. And do your best to avoid what isn't peer-reviewed, which would be your magazines, your newspapers, your editorials, even your podcasts, and especially Netflix. So even podcasts like mine, you have to understand that my bias will come from the nutrition certifications I've done, which, are evidence-based. They look at reviews of research and totalities of research before making conclusions, and then their conclusions are, we can assume that this might be the case. There's nothing set in stone. And what they do is look for themes and principles that underline methods, right? Energy balance being the way that our body weight is maintained is a principle, and then the methods would be your different diets. Now, if you do want to find good research and peer-reviewed research, the two best places would be Google Scholar, so not Google Scholar, and PubMed, and then you're going to be flooded then with actual peer-reviewed research. You can compare things, and if you ever look up, systematic review and then a subject that you're interested in, at least then you've got a better bet of finding a collection of research that you can look into, as opposed to someone just saying, hey, I saw this Netflix documentary and they told me that eating eggs is the same as smoking. Not really advice that you can take at heart. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I hope that clears a lot of things up for you. As I said, if you want a much deeper dive, then do check out Flat White episode 15 with Alan Flanagan around the strength of research. But for now, I want to thank you for listening to Next Step Espresso. If you could leave us a positive review on the podcast platform you're listening on. I don't think Spotify has one, but if you're listening on Apple or Google Podcasts, I'd really appreciate you giving us a great rating and helping spread the good word of Next Step Espresso. For now, have a great Monday, everyone, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another Shot of Fitness.